Hello and welcome to the River Cruising Masterclass. I am Sydney, your host extraordinaire if I don't say so myself. Today, for those of you who are listening on to do the video form on YouTube, I've got this super amazing Easter sweater just in time for the season. I do have matching outfits for all seasons, just so you know. Easter isn't special. Wait till you see my Cinco de Mayo outfit. So I am again taking a tiny detour from our series. I like to do two and then kind of take a little break just because I also get a little bored of hearing about all of them. So one of the things that's come up a lot, I was on Reddit a couple of weeks ago and there was something about it and I asked them what was the main reason that someone doesn't go on a river cruise? And one of the things that just surprised me to death is how many people are worried about river cruise water levels. So I had to do some research on this. I even did a blog post on thepoodlebooked.com because this has never been a concern for me. As someone who does it, I know that there's so many guardrails in place. It never really just came up. And so we're going to talk through this. I reached out to a couple of cruise lines to get some specific information on how often does this actually happen and where the real concern and worry could and should be. So let's talk about it. Water levels, right? Specifically, is my river cruise going to get canceled? Is there a huge risk? And should I even book one because of this? If you Google this topic, and as I said, on Reddit, it sounds terrifying because you're going on a river cruise for a specific reason. So today we're going to talk about what really happens, how often it happens, what a disruption may look like, and how to plan smart so that this is not something you have to stress about because, spoiler alert, the reality is very different than what the internet and the news makes it sound like. So the first thing is, do river cruises actually get canceled because of water levels? The short answer is almost never. Full cancellations are extremely rare. What does happen sometimes is itinerary adjustments, not cancellations. But let's just talk real data. So for example, Viking river cruises, less than 2% of all cruises have been affected by this. For Uniworld and Ama, it's less than 5% on a normal year will have a disruption because of water levels. And Avalon, it's usually less than 1%. And okay, I will tell you the exception though. In Ama Waterways, when I emailed them, they said it. The only time they've had anything worse than 5% is in 2018 when they had an extreme drought, and 13% of river cruises were affected by this problem. But let's think about that. In an extreme drought, only 13% had a serious disruption. So in a normal year, 95% of cruises run exactly as planned. That's an A. We're not even talking oh, that's an A minus. No, it's just a solid A. And so this is why I tell clients that it's not as big of a problem as it makes it sound online. River cruising wouldn't exist if water levels were constantly happening. If you get into some groups, they'll, it's worst case scenario or it happened to them. And I get it. It's not that it doesn't happen to people. And when it does happen to people, we're talking 150 people per cruise, per river cruise. And you probably got about, let's say 20 ships minimum that it's going to affect when it happens. And so I just say, these companies are not running billion-dollar operations on something that fails every summer. It's not successful because usually if something happens, if there's a huge disruption, they have to eat a certain cost and usually try to rebook you and give you some sort of credit. And they can't do that if it's happening all the time. Okay. So what we're going to talk about now is what a disruption actually means and what it looks like. So this is the biggest misunderstanding and probably one of the biggest fear points. When people hear your cruise has been disrupted, they immediately go to my trip is canceled, Am I stuck somewhere? Did I just waste thousands of dollars? And usually this isn't what it means. So the word disruption does not mean cancel trip or ruined vacation or chaos. It just means they've had to adjust logistics to keep your trip going. And most of the time, it's handled so smoothly that clients don't even talk about it when they come home because it really doesn't affect their trips. So one of the most common adjustments that will be made is a ship swap. So I have had clients who were sailing on the Danube River, and the low point of the water, let's say, is near Passau. Your ship can't safely pass this section. So instead of canceling your cruise, what the cruise line will do is, because almost every cruise line, the ships are identical, they will position in another identical ship on the other side of where the low water is. And you get off your ship, you do a full day of tours, and you board a ship that night, and you are in the exact same room. Your luggage is there, and you honestly can't even tell. The staff is with you, so you don't even get a new staff. So you go about your day like normal. You come back to a ship that looks exactly the same, except it might be called the Lyra versus the Sophia, or the Viking Freya, or the scenic, So you're gonna have an exact same, almost identical looking ship, the same crew, and you're gonna have your suitcase in your room. The only thing that sucks is that you do have to unpack and repack again, but it's not as serious as you think it is. As I say, I did have a client who had this happen to them. They barely noticed anything wrong. It was super well handled. So you don't have to make this into as big of a deal as it is. Because with the rivers in Europe, they change on a day-by-day basis. I had clients who were going to Europe, doing another Danube cruise, and they were leaving in 2 days. And all of the reports online were about how this huge storm came and there was flooding on the Danube River, and the rivers weren't able, and the cruises weren't able to go down the river because of it being so high that the ships couldn't go underneath the bridges. 2 days later, when my clients got to Budapest, the rivers were completely fine, had already gone down, and they were able to sail like nothing had happened. And those people who were there 2 days earlier, what they did is they just took a bus from Budapest to Slovakia, which would be the next stop on their trip, which is only like 2 hours, did a full tour, got on their ship, and continued on like nothing had happened. So that's where I'm kind of telling you that these changes aren't going to be as serious as you think they are. And so, as we talked about, there could be a short bus transfer, but this doesn't sound as crazy as it is. You're not on a tour bus all day. You didn't lose your cruise experience. Because if you've ever actually mapped how far things are apart from each other, it's not as far as you think it is. I did that for the Rhine River when I went on it. I did Basel to Amsterdam, and if you did it on the train, it's like a 6-hour train ride, because you're not going as far as you think it is, but you're able to just experience all those cute little cities and towns within it. So you get to do a full-on experience like that. And so that's where it's like you're maybe going to be on a bus for an hour or two to make up that time so that you can continue on your river cruise, and you will again have your luggage handled for you. There's going to be a guide that's going to go through everything, because this is where these river cruise companies have these contingency plans all the time in place. So is it ideal? No. But is it trip ruining it? No. Well, it is if you make it. My grandfather had this saying where it's a sick cat that can't hold up its own tail. So if you want to let having this sort of minor problem ruin your trip for you, it will. But if you are able to go with the flow, if you are able to just understand that this is no one's fault, it's Mother Nature, and understand that the cruise line is going to do everything it can to make sure you still have the best vacation, you will. And I can guarantee that. You'll be fine. It's one of those things where I get... Anyways, okay, so the next part of this is going to be port changes. So sometimes if there is a issue with the water, they might just like rearrange the cruise so that you still get to have a full experience, but you'd miss a port because of what's going on. However, this isn't as negative as you think it is because they're not canceling a stop. They are. Now, not all of the changes are going to be exactly the same. So instead of, ending in Passau, they might change up your end port or your beginning port or even your middle ports. This isn't a bad thing. So just because it's not the port on the itinerary doesn't mean that you aren't going to have an amazing time. As I have said before, sometimes my most unexpected places were the ones I enjoyed the most. So if your itinerary had planned to stop in one town, but due to water levels, the dock had to stop somewhere nearby, they're going to probably swap to a different port. Example, instead of one of the smaller villages, you might end up at a slightly larger town or one that's easier to access based on the water levels. You're still going to have, your tours, wine tasting, cultural experiences, all the things that you were going to have, but you're able to experiencing something unique. Because let's look at it. How many people on a river cruise are able to stop at this itinerary if it's unique and almost one of a kind? You are getting something special. You're not being punished. Like, isn't that just a way to look at it? I don't know. I could go down it. Okay. So what's happening behind the scenes when this happens? This is the part that most people don't understand. River cruise lines have full operations team, real-time river monitoring, and contingency route plans 24/7. They're watching the water depth, the weather patterns, the upstream conditions constantly. You might be hearing about a news article, but they've already done 3 different ways of contingency planning if something does go wrong. There are currently some water issues right now, and what they did is they just left the port a day early so that they didn't get stuck. And so the cruise started, excuse me, the cruise started at a different starting point, and the cruise line bussed people from where they were supposed to start to where the cruise was because they didn't want to affect the rest of the trip. So these are things that they're doing. Now, this means that Plan B has already been built before you've even determined there's a problem, and also C and D. Now, they are going to be focused on making sure that you have the best experience. So they're going to be repositioning the ships, arranging the transfers, and adjusting itineraries. Now, on top of that, you also have a designated travel advisor who is going to be in constant communication with the cruise line to determine what is going on, how that is going to be adjusted if there's issues, if they see the weather patterns changing. I'm on the websites checking all the different weather patterns to see how it's going to affect your trip and what is going to happen. And if it is an issue, there is travel insurance that specifically covers if you've missed ports on your cruise to reimbursement. It is an additional cost. I don't see it as like 100% worth it, but if there is these sort of issues, that is usually covered by insurance, depending on certain things. I like to put a little caveat because it depends on what travel insurance you have and what you're looking at getting. But this is where having a travel advisor is great to be that person to connect with all of these pieces, because I'm doing all the work and spending all the time checking all of those things that you don't want to, but you are stressed out about, if we're being honest with ourselves. So I'm here to support in all of those pieces and giving you those updates when I have them so that you don't feel stressed but relaxed about your next vacation. So this is kind of what we've been talking about. It isn't as scary as you think it is. It isn't going to be like this life-altering thing. And if it is, it happens to less than, on an average, 3 to 5%. And that is where it's like a major disruption. Okay, so let's talk about when this happens. Now, I'm going to give a caveat here that they're going to give these generic times, but I don't want you to go on a river cruise during these times because they say it. Because again, we're talking about 3 to 5% of cruises a year. It most likely won't even happen. Just wanna keep that in mind. All right. So the main risk is going to be when everyone wants to travel, which is August to October, because you're going into fall. They haven't had the rain. They've been in the summer. And the main risk areas are going to be like Passau and Regensburg, or near the Rhine Gorge on the Rhine River. So the peak risk, of course, is going to be into early October. Now, on the opposite end, in spring, in April and May, when is also everyone likes to travel because it's the cusp season, right? Is where you have high problem or high water from snow melt and rain, and the issue becomes getting the river cruises under the bridges because ships sometimes can't pass them. I will tell you that this resolves faster and it's less disruptive. Now, I was gonna say, so not that river cruising is risky, and there are certainly weeks that have like slighter odds, but again, it's still very rare. And if you talk to all of your friends or family or the dozens and dozens of clients I've had go in both April and in the spring and the fall, because that is the main time that everyone wants to go. I have only had one client who was truly affected by a change, and they went in July. So isn't that irony, right? And the ones that I had who were almost affected, they were in October, but it still was because of high water, not low water, even though ironically it should have been low water because it was in the fall. So that's where I'm telling you, like, based on my experience, I've only had one client who actually had to move a ship, and I have never had a client have one that has been canceled or majorly changed. So what happens if this affects you? So most of the time, we'll be in communication if there have been issues in the past couple of trips, me letting you know if I've heard of any low or high water, just as a stress reliever to be like, hey, here's what's going on. This is how it could affect your trip, but I don't see that happening. We will keep you in notice. Most of the time, the river cruise companies are not going to notify you until 24 hours before you get on the ship because of how volatile and how quickly rivers can change. So they won't know. It's not that they're keeping it from you. It's because of how quickly the river can change, getting more water, getting less water, that they don't want to get you to be overwhelmed by a scenario that actually isn't going to happen. Now, this is where those plans that we talked about, the contingency plans B through probably G that they have set up immediately, which will include maybe a ship swap halfway through your trip, a transfer, a small itinerary adjustment, all organized for you so you don't have to worry about it. Your trip will still continue, and you're still going to have the most amazing time. You're going to explore, you're going to eat well, you're going to experience everything. As long as you don't let this sort of thing ruin your great time, you will have a great time. Okay. So here are some of the ways that you can plan smarter if you want to, and it's, choosing the right time. So if you're super worried about this, you could go maybe in May and June where you'll have less likely to have any of these problems. I don't recommend like later July because then it's just so hot. Like July and August, it's just super hot. I wouldn't do it. I would say probably May or June if it's going to be something that will ruin your trip if this happens to you. As I said, you are going to work with someone who wants to be on your side, which is who I am. I am going to be tracking these things, as I said before, keeping you up to date on what those river conditions look like and supplier updates. I don't like to give seasonal trends because, as I've told you, the one client I've had that actually had to have their river cruise changed wasn't even in the times that these typically happen. So Mother Nature doesn't like to have anyone know what she's doing, and she will keep you guessing all the time. Another thing is travel insurance. If you had insurance, you can get the trip interruption coverage, the misconnection. You can get the one that also talks about cruising, which means that if the ship ports change, it will cover different things like that. If you have that insurance, you can possibly get a refund if there is an extreme amount of change, or if you get the additional coverage with the cruise protection, it will cover if you go to different ports than the ones you were expecting to go to. So, all of this to say, I know that people think that this is something that should stop you from going to river cruising. They're worried about river cruising because of the water levels. I just want to reiterate that it happens to less than 5% of river cruising a year. because that, I think, is the part that most people forget. They see it as this worst case scenario is going to happen to me, and it's not. You are going to be able to go on a beautiful river cruise. You're going to wake up in places like Budapest. You're going to walk off the ship and into the city center. You're not going to have to deal with the packing and unpacking. You're going to be able to see the castles, the vineyards, the small towns, all with less than 190 people on board. And you're going to have the most amazing time. And if it does affect you and you have to pack once in a 7-day trip, that is still less than you would have to pack to be able to see all 7 cities that you are going to see on a river cruise. You are trading this very small chance of an adjustment for the ability to be able to sail through these beautiful cities and explore these countries without having any of the stress and being able to have all of those places. Because let's be honest, this probably, if you want me to open a can of worms, isn't the most stressful part of your trip, even if it happens. Because if you're flying internationally, you're going to have to deal with delays or misconnections, which I also am here to help with and is 100% what I want to do with my time. And I do it with my clients where I'm making sure that there is an issue or you do miss a connection, that we're finding that alternative so that we can try to troubleshoot and get you home as soon as possible. But with river cruising, we're talking about a wonderful way to explore these beautiful cities without having to pack and repack every day. There is less than a 5% chance that your trip will be affected by extreme high or low water. And these river cruise companies have built contingency plans so that you are not affected by this if you do have a slight issue. I appreciate the concern, and I hope that maybe this is something that you either hadn't thought about or something that has stressed you out in the past, that maybe this has kind of helped alleviate that in terms of just that piece of it, of how little it actually does. I kind of relate it to the news and how the news makes everything sound so scary all the time, because that's what sells. When you see that sort of thing and it talks about how dangerous places are, that is what makes you continue to watch. It's what makes you continue to go onto their website and look for more information on it. But if you go to those places, you realize that that's just a super small part of the population, and it's not truly the full story that you will see. So with that, I just want to tell you, thank you for listening to the River Cruising Masterclass. I hope this has been an episode that you've enjoyed on the river levels and how it won't affect your next journey. I'm manifesting it for you. I don't think it will. Next week, we're going to continue on our full series on the river cruising. I will tell you, just as a secret, I have added one. So now we are on to 16. So there will be a 16th out of 15. I will tell you, I'm super excited on that part. I'm having the CEO of the company come on and talk about them on top of me doing my own personal review of it based on what's out there. Because when I reached out, the CEO was like, yes, I would love to, which makes my little heart pitter patter. But that's coming in the next couple of months. Thank you so much again for listening. I am Sydney. If you have any questions for me on river cruising or any other part of your next vacation, you can reach me at Sydney@thepoodlebookedit.com, on Facebook and Instagram at Travel Advisor Sydney, or on YouTube under The Poodle Booked It. I appreciate you so much for listening or watching this. It brings me a lot of joy to know that people are enjoying this and like to hear me talk, I guess. And with that, I will let you go, and I hope you have an amazing Easter.